Hi, everyone. This is Aaron Larson, executive editor of Power Magazine, and you're listening to the Power Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Patrick Maloney. He is the CEO of Inspire. Patrick, welcome to the show. Please tell a little bit about your company and what you guys do.
Sure thing. And Aaron, first, thank you so much for having me on. It's been amazing to listen to all your prior podcasts in advance of this, and definitely looking forward to spending some time with you. So, just to kind of put it simply, Inspire is a clean energy technology company. And what we do is we're building a completely digital energy experience that makes it insanely easy for consumers to adopt clean energy and clean energy technologies by providing them as a simple subscription service. We got started in about January of 2014 and have been pioneering this idea of kind of the subscriptionization of consumer energy over the course of that time. And I think what's really exciting is right now we're in the process of beginning to bring that same experience that we've been pioneering for all those years and now bring that to a national basis. So exciting time to Inspire.
It sounds like you're doing some innovative things. Can you talk a little bit about how you identified the need for a company like Inspire? What basically led you to create the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've always was somebody that was really passionate about the outdoors and really passionate about the environment. And I actually first got my start in the energy industry back in 2007 in the founding of a prior company. We ultimately grew and scaled and ultimately sold to NRG back when David Crane was still the CEO over there. And, over the course of that journey, I learned a ton of things. Of course, learned how to take something from a piece of paper and grow it through to scale and kind of how to build a high-performing company and culture. But I think what I learned most in that journey was that, the energy industry at the time was the number one source of global carbon emissions. And for me, it was just kind of that moment that I realized that, hey, this is the number one contributor to this changing climate. And for me, it kind of set in motion this belief that I had to build a company that I thought in success could be one of the fastest ways to rapidly decarbonize the energy system and ideally reverse the trend that we were seeing in our climate. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I think there's been so much innovation that we've seen in the energy industry, predominantly at the grid level and at the infrastructure level. But when I kind of took a step back and looked at it, what I saw was just almost none of that innovation was making its way to the consumer level. It was, if you think about the average customer today, the energy experience they have is almost 100% identical to the energy experience that they had 30 years ago. More than 60% of consumers are still getting paper bills. They're still 7 pages long. It's still communicating them in tiers and things that they don't understand. And when we looked out and saw all of these other industries, whether it be Airbnb and hospitality or kind of Uber and transportation or Amazon and retail, in all those industries, the consumer was king, and it was a consumer technology company that really figured out how to transform that customer's experience. And in the process of transforming that experience, what we saw was just this rapid transition away from an old business model into a completely new business model. And we kind of just believe that the energy industry needs that Amazon moment. It needs that Airbnb moment. It needs that Uber moment. It's going to happen at the customer level. And if it happens that way, we really do believe we have a shot at rapidly decarbonizing. Because what we see is just so much latent demand right now for consumers who, kind of like me, see the same issue. They realize that today, the number one source of their carbon footprint is often their home energy consumption, but they don't know what to do. And, I can kind of go on and on about this, but you look at some of our research and what we see is that, nearly 8 in 10 Americans want to do something to reduce their impact on climate, yet most don't know how. And then when you click a little bit more deeply into that data, what you see is that, most of them think that recycling is the number one way that they could have a personal impact. And recycling's hard. It's just amazing. Really, you got 2 different bins, and you got to walk outside. You got to do all these different things. When a customer can have the same amount of impact as 10 years of recycling just by choosing Inspire for a single year and eliminating their home energy carbon footprint, it's really magical. It's really, I think for us, we're finding ourselves at an inflection point where the world seems to be moving from inevitable to imminent in this transition, and Inspire is positioned through its digital energy experience to lead the way in that and to empower those consumers.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you talk about that, because, looking at my own life as a consumer, everywhere that I have lived, and I've lived in many places, Minnesota, Iowa, Virginia, California, Florida, I've never had the ability to choose my power company. It's always just been, the wires come from this power company. That's where your bill comes from. That's your choice. That's it. But I know there are places throughout the country where they do have choice. I think Texas is big on that, and many other areas. But, for me personally, I've not had that ability. How does your company manage the grid experience for customers? Like, how does it work? The other part of that question is, where can it be done? I mean, is this available to everybody, or is it only in specific places right now?
Yep, great question. So over the last 7 years, what we did is we really focused on pioneering this idea of a subscription model in consumer energy. And the first place that we focused on doing that was within competitive markets where consumers had the ability to choose their source of energy and who is going to provide it, and their, the product experience that they wanted. And when we would talk to customers, what we would hear is just the same thing over and over again. I don't know what my bill changes. I don't know what it is. It says 7 different pages. I don't know what tiers are. And then underneath that was also this like feeling of guilt that I also know that seems to me that the majority of this is coming from, fossil fuels or kind of highly carbon intensive energy resources. And there's just kind of this feeling of guilt that we would hear from consumers about that. And so what we focused on was entering into those markets where we could really build a technology platform that would effectively almost sit on top of the grid and allow us to then revolutionize the business model into a subscription model, almost like a Netflix-like subscription for clean energy. We found that solved a lot of these pain points, both the kind of functional pain points of I don't know what this is and it still feels like it's old and it's not digital and it's 7 pages, as well as kind of that more kind of personal or kind of, path to enlightenment, if you will, of being able to feel good about the fact that you're now net zero carbon by choosing a product like Inspire. And so we did that over the last 7 years. And now we're at the place where we're now beginning to take the model we pioneered there and now bring it to a national basis. And so to answer your question on how that works is, in a matter of 2 minutes, a customer can come to the Inspire website, give us some of their information. Basically, we sync their account to their utility account, almost like like a mint.com. It's easy to sync your account. And then what we do is we take the data from syncing that and then transform that bill into a simple subscription for that customer to now be able to have one simple bill where they pay Inspire. We can tell them that all of their energy will be flat every month and have to worry about any kind of bill volatility or issues, and that all of their energy will be matched with renewables no matter where they're at. We're now bringing that nationally. We're not going to open up every single market immediately. We are kind of taking a targeted approach as we start to expand it nationally. But the platform itself is going to be open nationally as we begin to scale it throughout 2021. From
what I understand, you deal in renewable energy credits somehow to make this work. Can you talk a little bit about renewable energy credits or RECs and how they work and how they are generated and how you get a hold of them?
Yep, absolutely. So as I'm sure you know, and many folks on your, that listen to your podcast know, when a unit of energy is produced from a renewable resource, effectively two things are created. The first is just the electrons of that energy. And it's kind of undifferentiated, goes into the grid, follows the path of least resistance, and It's effectively the energy that electrifies the grid. And at the same time, when that unit of energy is produced from a renewable resource, like a wind facility or a solar facility, another commodity is produced, which is called a renewable energy credit, which is the renewable attributes of that generation. And so it's usually defined by things like what type of resource was it? Was it a wind plant or a solar facility? When was it created? Was it created, last week, last month, last year? And then where was it located? Where on the grid did it actually come from? Was it near your home? Was it in a different state? In a different, kind of regional transmission operator? Where did that kind of take place? When we provide our products to Inspire, what we do is we buy both of those two things. We buy the electrons and we buy the renewable energy credits and provide those to the customer in one transaction. And so it's a way to be able to allow the everyday consumer to be able to access clean energy in the same way that we see almost every major kind of government or, the Apples, Amazons, Googles of the world, who are all moving now towards net zero, carbon, to be able to bring that down to the customer level so they at their individual home can now move to net zero carbon in their home energy footprint by bringing both, again, the electrons and the renewable energy credits to those customers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds really interesting and very innovative how you're making that work. So,
what's so important about those things is it actually drives the underlying economics of those renewable resources. And so it effectively creates another revenue stream that drives further growth in renewables into the grid to then accelerate the development of new renewable resources into the grid. I think there was a really interesting data point, which I'm sure you or many folks who are listening have heard, which is that in Tesla's most recent kind of public financials, when you click into those financials, what you see is that one of the greatest areas of the profitability of Tesla in the last quarter was actually their ability to sell their renewable energy credits to drive profitability and ultimately allow them to continue to innovate and invest and grow. And so it's a really critical driver of innovation is the ability to kind of buy, sell, trade these renewable energy credits.
Can you define what types of renewables you're mainly dealing in? Is it mostly solar? Is it mostly wind or hydro even? Or where do you get most of these from?
Great question. So at Inspire, there are a lot of different ways to provide a renewable energy product. At Inspire, we believe in providing the highest quality renewable energy experience in the marketplace. And everyone could define that differently. At Inspire, we define it in kind of three ways. The first is, what kind of resource produced that renewable energy? And to your point, it could be wind, it could be solar, it could be hydro. At Inspire, we really believe that the highest quality renewables are wind and solar. And so we buy from wind and solar facilities first, or really, exclusively. The second is, when was that actually produced? So what's kind of the time question? Within the renewable energy market, you could buy renewable energy attributes going back a whole number of years. And there are standards that exist of like what considers something to be a kind of new renewable. We believe that for us, we're always seeking to procure renewables that have been produced recently. So time matters to us. And the last one is geographically, which is, was it produced near the kind of source of consumption? And again, that's an area where we really focus on trying to procure renewables that are as close to the source of consumption as possible to really match that with our customer. Of course, always within the constraints of supply and demand within a specific area, because some areas, of course, have more renewables than others. And so you have to be kind of somewhat flexible while really trying to always get closer and closer to those three standards. Does that make sense?
You bet. Are there any sort of policy changes that you can think of, either on the federal or state level, that would help expand renewable energy credits and help kind of solve the climate crisis?
So, I think first, the most important policy change that we could see in this country would be to create fully competitive markets that allowed both, really first consumers to be able to choose, And then two, for companies that want to bring new products to market to ultimately be able to enter and grow and thrive. But at Inspire, we really do believe that revolutions are driven by people. And right now, when we look out, what we see is there are millions of people marching in the streets demanding action on climate and believing that clean energy is the most important sword in that fight. We see that, when we're looking at things like the election right now, it's the climate and the clean energy transition is one of the most important issues of this election. And, we may very well find ourselves in a new administration that is wanting to commit trillions of dollars towards becoming the world's leader in the clean energy transition. And what we believe is fundamentally critical to that, and you hit on this earlier, is you've lived in all these different places, yet you've almost always just been a captive customer that's never had the ability to choose. You just kind of get what it is, and it's an experience that's been the same for the last 30 years. And so, what we really need in this country is federal leadership to create fully competitive markets that will enable the kind of digital transformation that we've seen led by the consumer in areas, like retail with Amazon or, hospitality with Airbnb. We need that moment to happen here. And to allow that kind of market to exist, we need to see real federal leadership in creating real competitive markets to give customers the power of choice and ultimately give companies the ability to serve those needs. So I think that would be kind of where I would focus first.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. It's driven by the people. Yeah. It's driven by consumers demanding change and wanting change. And there's a lot of renewable support out there. There's a lot of momentum going against some of the other fossil fuels. So I'd say the change is already taking place here.
Yeah, the trend is, you're right. It's definitely taking place, and the consumers are demanding it and expect it. And we need policies that are actually going to serve the needs of the people and allow them to have the choice to take action on climate if it's what they want to do. And that's what we see right now, is that there's a groundswell of people that now want to take that action, but they're still captive. And I think we need to do that to empower them to have that choice.
Now, I don't know if Inspire is doing anything outside of the U.S., but I'm sure, just from your own personal knowledge, have you studied what other countries are doing? Does anybody else have a model like this out there? Or are they doing anything different that you think U.S. consumers and companies could learn from?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, when we look internationally, we see so many amazing examples of leadership in the clean energy transition. I think, one simple example would be just to look at Australia, where you have an entire country that has a fully competitive market. And when you look into that market, what you see is, there's massive innovation happening at the customer level. There's, the adoption of things like solar and storage is, orders of magnitude higher than we've been able to achieve so far here in the U.S., upwards of 15 to 20% adoption of those technologies. You have folks like Tesla being able to invest in, huge grid scale technologies to provide more resiliency for renewables and storage. And now you see folks that are in the delivery of retail energy services now bundling things like solar and storage into their service offering to bring all those to customers as a service. And so, that would be just, one simple example. I think when you look into kind of the European markets, what we see is really great leadership at the data level. Right now, again, we have so much conversation on consumer data and data privacy. And, I think we're now getting to a place in this country where we understand and believe that customer data is their data. And yet when you look at data access in the U.S. markets for folks, that have smart meters, they're almost entirely captive. They're not able to access their data. They're not even using that data. And certainly that data is not, able to be shared to then be able to accelerate more of a clean energy transition. And so, the ability for us to really lead in this industry requires data. and it requires cloud computing to support that data so we can really innovate for the customers and accelerate this change. And I think the one place I'd probably point to is if you just want to look at, we can certainly look internationally, but in many ways we don't actually even have to look internationally. We can actually look right here at home and say, I think you brought this up earlier, but look at the state of Texas. It is the most advanced energy market in the U.S. with the greatest amount of renewable energy production. There's more clean energy on the grid in Texas than there is, coal in that, in that grid. Mm-hmm. And it's been driven because it's been able to create a fully competitive energy environment with the market fundamentals that support innovation and support consumer choice. And so there's so many great examples, whether you look abroad or you look even right here at home, for the type of environment that supports customer choice and innovation. We just now need to see that kind of leadership at the federal level to bring it to, all Americans.
Well, you gave some great examples there. I guess I've kind of run out of questions for you. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention before we wrap up the show?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say personally is, Aaron, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. Again, it truly is an honor. And, when I think about the thing that I'd most want, your listeners and really the world to think is just about this idea that, this is going to be a consumer revolution. That there are so many people out there that believe in the clean energy transition and that we as a country have a chance to lead here. And we believe at Inspire that clean energy is everyone's right. And we're now trying to put together a plan that finally empowers that and allows us to truly accelerate this transition and empower those consumers. So, we are very much looking forward to rolling this out nationally. And we're very much looking forward to kind of keeping you updated as we continue to progress.
Thank you, Patrick Maloney, CEO of Inspire. I appreciate you taking the time to join me, and thanks again.
Of course. Thanks so much, Aaron. Really appreciate it.